The rain came down hard on the outskirts of Knoxville that October night. East Tennessee, rain, the kind that arrives without apology and stays without permission, moving in sheets off the ridge line, turning the county roads into black mirrors that reflected nothing useful. Everything past 50 feet dissolved into gray. The world shrank to what the headlights touched and nothing beyond. Cassidy Monroe had been driving in it for 4 hours. She was 22 years old and beautiful in the way of someone who had no time to think about it. Dark red hair pulled back with a rubber band she had found on the floor of her car. Eyes the color of creek water in summer, that shifting green-gray that changed with the light. A small scar above her left eyebrow from a cabinet door when she was 9, hands chapped from washing dishes between delivery runs because she worked 2 jobs in the same building and neither one paid enough to make that arrangement embarrassing. She drove a 2003 Honda Civic with one working headlight, a cracked rear bumper held with zip ties, and a check engine light that had been on so long she had stopped registering it. The car smelled like takeout containers and the vanilla air freshener she had bought 3 months ago at the Dollar General, which had long since stopped smelling like vanilla and now smelled like the memory of vanilla, which was somehow worse than nothing. On the passenger seat sat an insulated delivery bag with 3 orders. On her phone, clipped to the vent with a magnetic mount that kept slipping, the delivery app showed her the remaining addresses. She had 4 more hours left in her shift. After that came a 4-hour gap before her opening prep shift began at 5 in the morning. She had been sleeping in that gap on a rolled up yoga mat in the restaurant break room because her apartment was 22 minutes away, and the gas it would cost to drive back and forth twice was gas she did not have. This was not temporary, it had been her life for 8 months. The first 2 deliveries went without incident. A ranch house off Miller Creek Road, where a man in a Tennessee Volunteers sweatshirt handed her a $5 bill without eye contact. A duplex near the highway, where 2 college girls answered the door together, and one of them said, "It is so wet out there," and the other said, "Do you want to come in for a second?" And Cassidy said, "No, thank you," and was back in her car before either of them could feel good about the offer. The third address was the one that changed everything. The app showed 4417 Harlan Spur Road. She had delivered to Harlan Spur before a quiet stretch of old farmland, gone to gravel and overgrown fence line, the kind of road that showed up in Knox County, but felt like it belonged somewhere else entirely. Somewhere time had decided was not worth maintaining. A few occupied houses, some structures harder to categorize. She had delivered to the farmhouse at the far end twice. A retired couple, tipped in cash. She turned onto Harlan Spur at 9:47. The rain was heaviest here, hammering the roof of the Civic so hard she could not hear the radio. Her one working headlight caught gravel and wet weeds, and not much else. She watched the odometer because the address numbers on Harlan Spur were not reliable, and the GPS had a tendency to place her 50 yards from the actual structure. She almost missed the turn, a dirt track cutting left off the main road, no mailbox, no number visible. The GPS showed arrival in 200 feet, and there was nothing 200 feet ahead except tree line. She stopped, looked left down the dirt track. There was a light at the end of it, not a porch light. Something industrial, the kind that comes from inside a structure rather than mounted above a door. She sat with the engine idling and the rain hammering the roof. The thing about delivery work, about enough nights of it, is that you develop a feel for addresses that are not what they appear. She had delivered to a meth house twice before she understood what she was looking at. She had delivered to a chop shop once, and the man who answered was shirtless and furious. And she had not gone back. You learn to read small wrongnesses, the way a building sat, the way a light looked, the number of vehicles relative to the address. The building at the end of the dirt track had 3 vehicles she could make out through the rain. That building, that size, that lighting did not match a residential delivery. She pulled forward anyway because the GPS was insisting, and because she needed the tip, and because sometimes wrong looking places turned out fine. What she found was a converted equipment barn, metal siding newer than the surrounding land suggested. A roll up door on the far left closed, a regular door in the center slightly open. The fluorescent light inside pushed through the gap in a thin white line. She rolled down her window in the rain and called toward the door. The door opened wider. Not the person who had placed the order. She understood this before she could have explained how. The man in the doorway was in his 30s, broad, wearing a canvas work jacket, looking at her car with the expression of a man running a calculation rather than waiting for food. Behind him, in the fluorescent interior, she saw what she saw. A woman, young, maybe her own age, dark hair, sitting in a metal chair, wrists zip-tied to the armrests, not struggling. The particular stillness of someone who had been in that chair long enough to understand that struggling accomplished nothing. A second man stood deeper in the room. He turned when the door opened and looked at the car, and she saw his face clearly in the light, before her body understood what her eyes were registering. The man in the doorway said something. She did not hear it. She had already put the Civic in reverse. She backed out of the dirt track faster than was safe, and the rear tires slid in the wet gravel, and she corrected and came out onto Harlan Spur Road, going backward, and then she shifted and drove. She drove without a destination for 45 seconds, which was how long it took for the adrenaline to move from signal to flood, and for her hands on the wheel to begin shaking hard enough that she had to grip tighter. Her one headlight cut through the rain, and she was doing 50 on a road that asked for 20, and she needed to stop, and she could not stop on this road. She turned onto County Road 11 and drove until she saw light. Doyle's. She knew it by sight without knowing its name. A structure that had started as a gas station in 1968 and grown over the decades the way things grow when no one is managing the architecture. A 2-bay garage, still operational. A small attached diner with 8 booths and a counter with 6 stools. 2 original Gap pumps under a canopy that had never been replaced. An open sign in red neon that Doyle's son kept burning until 11 because his father had kept it burning until 11, and that was simply how it was done. Cassidy pulled into the lot and sat with the engine running and her hands on the wheel and her chest doing something that was not quite crying and not quite not crying. Then she picked up the delivery bag from the passenger seat because 8 months had trained her never to leave the bag in the car, and she got out in the rain and went inside. The bell above the door made it sound. The diner was dim, the way places are dim when they have always been dim. The overhead light supplemented by a Budweiser neon sign, and the glow from the pie case and the warm inadequacy of 40-watt bulbs over a counter that had been the same counter since 1971. It smelled like coffee and pie crust and decades of grease and industrial cleaner baked into the walls. A woman stood behind the counter, 60s gray hair in a bun, A face that had been kind for so long, the kindness had become structural. She looked up when Cassidy came in. A man sat in the far corner booth. She registered him the way you register things when your nervous system is still running threat assessments on everything in the room. Large, very large. Sitting with his back to the wall and his face angled toward the door in the manner of someone who had been positioning himself that way for a very long time. Gray streaked beard, a leather vest over a dark flannel shirt, both forearms on the table, heavily tattooed, the size of things that suggested a larger category of arm than most men carried. He had been eating. He had stopped when she came in. 2 plates on his table, one in front of him half finished, one on the opposite side untouched, steam still rising off it. The woman behind the counter was already moving toward Cassidy with the instinct of someone who had seen enough people come through a door wrong to recognize the pattern immediately. "Honey," she said. "Come here and sit down." Cassidy said, "I need to use a phone." The woman said, "You can use the phone. Sit down first." Cassidy stood just inside the door, with rain dripping off her jacket and the delivery bag in her hand, and her chest still doing its complicated work. She looked at the counter. She looked at the corner booth. She did not know why she looked at the corner booth a second time. The man there was watching her with pale blue eyes that were very still and gave nothing away, not because there was nothing behind them, but because what was behind them had learned long ago not to surface without reason. She went to the counter. She sat on the nearest stool. The woman put a mug of coffee in front of her without asking, and Cassidy wrapped both hands around it, and the warmth moved through her palms into her chest, and she sat there a moment, just holding it. The woman said, "My name is Patsy. Tell me what happened to you." Not a question. The phrasing of someone who assumed an answer existed and was prepared to wait for it. Cassidy told her. She kept her voice low and told it in order: the app address, the dirt track, the barn, the fluorescent light, the woman in the chair. She told it efficiently without embellishment, the way she had learned to tell difficult things. Because in her experience, adding color made people uncomfortable, and uncomfortable people became less useful. She was not aware that the man in the corner booth had set down his fork and was listening to every word. When she finished, Patsy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you know whose property that is off Harlan Spur?" Cassidy said she did not. Patsy said, "I think you need to talk to Cole." She was already looking toward the corner booth with an expression that was neither simple nor easily read. The expression of a woman who had her own long history with the man at that table and had made her peace with what it meant and what it did not mean. The man in the corner booth looked across the diner. He picked up his coffee and held it with both hands and said, "Come over here and tell me what the second man looked like." His voice was low and rough, the voice of a man who had spent decades using it sparingly and projecting it through noise. It carried across the diner without effort. Cassidy looked at him. Her eyes did the thing they did when she was assessing a new danger against the one she had just come from. He said, "I know whose property that is. I need to know who was inside the building." She got off the stool. She took her coffee mug with her, which told him something. People who carry their coffee when they move in uncertain situations have learned to keep their hands occupied and their resources close. She sat down on the bench across from him, across from the untouched plate, and she looked at him with a directness that was not bravery, but was the functional substitute for bravery that develops in people for whom real bravery is too expensive to maintain continuously. She described the second man. Precisely. Height, build, hair color, the specific way he had been standing when he turned toward the door, the canvas jacket on the first man, the make of one of the three vehicles, a dark blue Ford pickup newer model, backed in. Cole listened. His face did not change, but his left hand, flat on the table, closed slowly into a fist and then opened again. His name was Cole Hargrove, 56 years old. Sergeant at Arms of the Desert Wolves, MC, for 14 years. Before that, he had been other things, harder things, things that had left their marks on his body and face and in the way he occupied a room. The scar running from his left ear to his jaw came from a knife in a Chattanooga parking lot when he was 31. The slight asymmetry of his nose came from a fight he had not lost, but had not fully won either. He had been arrested 6 times, convicted twice, served a combined 4 years at 2 Tennessee facilities, and walked out of the second one with a clarity about himself that had taken years to trust. He was not a reformed man in the evangelical sense, the kind who wanted acknowledgement for the distance between what he had been and what he was now. He was simply a man who had learned at considerable cost to himself and others where his lines were. Those lines had not moved in 11 years. Every Friday night for 6 years, Cole Hargrove drove his motorcycle to Doyle's on County Road 11 and sat in the same corner booth and ordered the same meal twice. The ritual had started the year after his sister Lena would have turned 50. He had done the math on what her life might have looked like, the age she would have been, the meals she might have eaten in a place like this, an ordinary place that smelled like coffee and kept its lights on past dark. He ordered 2 plates because that was the version of her he had, the only version left, the one that existed in the things he could still do. Nobody at Doyle's asked about the second plate. Patsy had understood within the first month and had told no one. Some things you receive without being invited to. He looked at the young woman across from him. She was sitting with her shoulders pulled slightly inward, not from cold, from the particular habit of a person who had spent years making herself a smaller target. He recognized that posture from the inside. He said, "What is your name?" She said, "Cassidy." Cass. He said, "Who knows you are making deliveries on Harlan Spur tonight?" She said, "The restaurant." "The app." "My phone shows the route." He said, "Where is your phone?" She said, "In my jacket pocket." He said, "Take out the delivery app and close it." She looked at him for a moment. Then she took out her phone and closed the app. Cole picked up his coffee. Outside, the rain kept doing what it had been doing all night. He set the mug down. He said, "The second man, heavier set, maybe 40. Did he have a tattoo on the right side of his neck?" Cassidy went still. Then she said, "Yes. Something dark." "I only saw it for a second." Cole said, "His name is Ray Coulter. He is a deputy with the Knox County Sheriff's Department." The silence that followed was the silence of someone absorbing information that reorganizes several things they thought they understood. She said, "He works for the sheriff." Cole said, "He works for Marcus Vale." The sheriff is a different conversation. He watched her process this. She did it quickly and without visible panic. She was frightened. He could see it clearly. But she was not letting the fear run ahead of her thinking, which was rarer than it should have been and mattered in situations like this one. Her phone rang. The sound made her flinch. She looked at the screen. The color of her face changed. Cole said, "Who is it?" She turned the phone so he could see. The name on the screen read, Marcus. Cole looked at it, then at her. She said, "He owns the restaurant where I work." Cole said, "Don't answer it." She let it ring. The sound in the quiet diner was very loud and very long. 6 rings. 7. Silence. 3 seconds later, it rang again. Cole placed 2 fingers on the back of her hand, not grabbing just the weight of contact, and said, "Let it go." She let it go. The ringing stopped. A text arrived. She read it. Her hand holding the phone was working hard at not shaking. She turned the phone so Cole could read it. The message said, "Cass, you made a wrong turn on Harlan Spur tonight. Come back and get the bag you left behind." There was no bag. She had taken the delivery bag with her when she ran. It was sitting on the bench beside her right now. Cole read the message. He looked at her. She was looking at him with those green-gray eyes, and there was something in them now that had passed beyond fear into the territory where a person makes a cold calculation about exactly how bad things are. He said, "He knows you were there." She said, "Yes." He said, "He knows you saw something." She said, "Yes." He said, "And he knows you left." She said, "Yes." Cole picked up his coffee. He looked at Patsy across the diner, and Patsy was already looking at him with the expression of a woman who had been watching him sit in that booth every Friday for 6 years and understood without being told that something in the room had shifted. He looked back at Cassidy. Her hair was still wet from the rain. The rubber band holding it back had gone slack, and pieces had come loose around her face. She had a scar above her left eyebrow. Her jacket had a tear in the left sleeve, repaired with iron-on patch tape in a slightly wrong color. She was sitting across from him with both hands around a mug and a delivery bag on the seat beside her, and a phone with a message from a man who was telling her in the smoothest possible way that he knew exactly where she had been and was already managing his exposure. He had seen this shape before, not this specific situation, this specific geometry. A young woman who had stumbled into the wrong geography and was now inside consequences she had not chosen and could not simply exit. He had seen this shape 28 years ago. He had been on the wrong side of it then. He had been the one who was not there when his sister Lena stopped answering her phone, who drove to Nashville and then to Memphis and then to 3 other cities, following a trail that went cold in stages until there was nothing left. No body, no answer, no place to put 28 years of the grief that comes from not knowing. The second plate on the table had gone cold. Cole looked at it. He looked at Cassidy. He slid the plate across the table toward her. Deliberate, unhurried, carrying the weight of something that had no name but was understood anyway. He said, "Eat something. Then we figure out what comes next." She looked at the plate. She looked at him. Something moved through her face that was complicated and quick. Something she pulled back before it could finish, which was something she was clearly practiced at. Being composed at moments when composure was the only available resource. She picked up the fork. Outside, the rain continued doing what it had been doing all night. Patient and indifferent and loud against the canopy over the gas pumps. The neon open sign made its quiet electrical sound. Patsy moved behind the counter with the practiced quiet of a woman who understood that certain conversations needed to happen without an audience and that the best thing she could do was be present and invisible at the same time. Cole watched Cassidy eat, not in the way of someone watching, in the way of someone keeping watch. There was a difference, and he had always known the difference, and it had been a very long time since the difference had mattered to him in relation to another person. He thought about the second plate, what it had been for 6 years and what it was tonight. He thought about a 22-year-old woman with chapped hands and a torn sleeve who delivered food for a man who was now sending her messages at 10 o'clock on a rainy Friday night to tell her she had made a wrong turn and should come back for something she had not left. He thought about Harlan Spur Road and what was at the end of it, and what it connected to, and how long it had been operating. He thought about Ray Coulter in a fluorescent building on a Friday night, and what that said about how far the geography of this thing extended. He thought about a conversation he had declined 3 years ago, and about what declining it had and had not accomplished. He thought about a man named Marcus Vale, whose name had come to Cole through a supplier who ran adjacent to the Desert Wolves, a man who had arrived with a business proposal that Cole had understood immediately and refused immediately without needing it explained. The man who brought the proposal had seemed genuinely surprised by the refusal. That surprise had told Cole something about how Vale's operation was received in certain circles. There was also a woman named Rita Walsh. She was a Tennessee Bureau of Investigation agent who had called Cole 14 months ago because his name had appeared in the margins of something she was building. She had wanted to know what he knew about Vale's connections to county officials. He had told her what little he could. She had given him her number and said she hoped he would call if anything came up. He had kept the number because he had known what Vale's operation was, and he had known it was running in this county, and he had known that eventually there would be a night shaped like this one. He just had not known what form it would take. He picked up his phone. He found Rita Walsh's contact. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at Cassidy across the table. She had eaten most of what was on the plate. She was holding the fork loosely now, looking at the window in the rain beyond it, with the expression of someone doing arithmetic about their own situation. She said, without looking away from the window, "I have 3 more deliveries in the bag." He said, "They can wait." She said, "I need the tips." He said, "I know." She turned from the window and looked at him. Not a question. The thing past questions, the thing that comes after a person has asked enough of them without getting useful answers, that they stop phrasing things as questions and start phrasing them as observations and waiting to see what returns. She said, "You know what that place is?" He said, "Yes." She said, "And you know who runs it?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Then you know that me sitting in this diner is not something that fixes itself." Cole looked at her for a long moment. A truck went past on the county road, outside its headlights, sweeping the window briefly before disappearing. The rain had not let up. The night had not changed its mind about anything. He said, "No, it does not fix itself." He said, "But you are not fixing it alone." She held his gaze. He had the sense she was running some internal assessment, checking whatever information she had against whatever instinct she had developed over 22 years of needing to read people quickly and accurately without the benefit of being wrong. Whatever she found, she did not argue with it. Cole dialed Rita Walsh's number. The night outside was the same night it had been. The rain was the same rain. But the room had changed in the way rooms change when a decision gets made inside them. Not the dramatic change of sudden action, the quieter change of direction, a small shift that only becomes visible later when you look back and try to identify exactly where things turned. Cole Hargrove had been sitting in that corner booth every Friday for 6 years, ordering 2 plates and eating 1. Tonight was the first Friday in 6 years that the second plate had been used for something other than absence. He did not let himself think too long about what that meant, but he did not refuse to think about it either. He sat in his corner booth with the phone at his ear and Cassidy Monroe across from him and the rain against the window and all of the long Tennessee night still ahead of them, and he thought this is the shape of things when they are about to change. He had been in that shape before. He knew its weight. This time he intended to stay in it all the way to the end. Rita Walsh picked up on the second ring. Her voice carried the compressed alertness of someone who had not been asleep, who had perhaps not been asleep for several nights. Running, running on coffee, and the specific fuel of a case that had been opened too long without finding a door. Cole said her name. He said it was him. He said he had something she needed to hear. A pause on the line. Not surprise. The recalibration of someone adjusting to a new input in the middle of a night already full of them. Then she said, "Talk." He talked. Short sentences. The young woman across from him. Harlan Spur Road. The barn. What was inside? The name Ray Coulter. The text message from Marcus Vale that had arrived 9 minutes after Cassidy left the property. When he finished, the silence on the line was different from the pause at the beginning. It was the silence of someone working to contain a reaction. Rita Walsh said she saw Coulter inside the building. Cole said she described him before I gave her the name. Neck tattoo. Height. Build. She is precise. Rita said Cole. Does she know what she walked into? Cole looked at Cassidy across the table. Cassidy was watching him reading the conversation from one side of it. He said she understood enough to leave. Rita said, "I need to talk to her. Tonight." Cole said, "I know. How far out are you?" Rita said 40 minutes, maybe 35. He said, "Come to Doyle's on County Road 11. Come in your personal vehicle." She understood what that meant. Not her official vehicle. Not anything that connected to a system that might have a leak somewhere between her office and the Knox County infrastructure. She said 30 minutes. Cole put the phone on the table. He looked at Cassidy. She had pushed the empty plate aside and was sitting with both forearms on the table and her hands flat, composed, and alert. Simultaneously, the posture of someone who had decided composure was the available tool and was using it. He said there is a woman coming who has been building a case around Marcus Vale for over a year. She is TBI, state level. She is not connected to the county sheriff's office, and she is not connected to anything that runs through Gary Morrison's department. Cassidy said, "How do you know she is not?" He said, "Because she called me 14 months ago, looking for information about Vale, and people who are protecting someone do not call outside sources asking how to build a case against them." She thought about this. Then she said, "Why did she call you specifically?" Cole said, "Because my name appeared in records connected to the man who originally brought Vale's proposal to me. She was working the edges of the network, and I was an edge she could reach. I told her what little I knew. She gave me her number. She said if something came up, she hoped I would call." Cassidy said, "And you kept her number." He said, "Yes." She said, "Why?" "If you thought you had nothing to tell her." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because I knew what Vale's operation was, and I knew it was running in this county, and I knew there would eventually be a night like tonight. I just did not know what shape it would take." She looked at him steadily. She said, "You have been waiting for this." He said, "I have been keeping a number." There is a difference. She held his gaze for a moment longer. Then she looked down at her hands on the table. He said, "There is something else I need to ask you. When people like Vale look for leverage, they look for what a person cares about. You have been working 3 jobs to pay for something. That is not a woman with nothing to lose." She was quiet. The quiet was its own answer. He said, "Your mother." She said she is at Mercy West, the hospital on the north side, end-stage liver disease. She has been there 8 months. She needs the ventilator 3 nights a week and dialysis twice a week. And the insurance she had through her employer ran out in March. She said it the way she said everything. Efficiently, without excess, from the slight distance that had become the only way to keep functioning. Cole said, "And you are the one paying for it?" She said, "There's no one else." He said, "Was she good to you?" She looked at him. The question sat between them. She said she tried. When she could, when the drinking did not take up all the space. Cole nodded. He did not offer it a response that would make it smaller than it was or larger than she wanted it to be. He simply received it. And she seemed to understand that was what he was doing, because something in her posture shifted slightly, not relaxing exactly, but releasing a small amount of the energy it had been spending on containment. She said she does not know about the 3 jobs. She thinks I have one job at the restaurant. I do not want her to know how bad the money is. Cole said, "You are protecting her." She said, "I am doing what needs doing." He looked at her for a moment. He thought about a woman in a hospital on the north side of Knoxville, attached to a machine, doing the work her body had stopped doing. He thought about what it cost Cassidy Monroe, not just in money, but in the specific daily expenditure of continuing to show up for a person who had given her a difficult life and showing up not because the life had been easy, but because the woman was still her mother. He had not shown up for Lena. He had been 28 years old and deep in his own choices and his own anger. And he had told himself she was fine. She was an adult. She could handle herself. He had not checked in for 6 weeks while she was working a job in Nashville that had not been what it appeared to be working for a man whose name Cole had not known at the time, and whose operation he had not understood, and whose reach he had not imagined. By the time he had understood any of it, she was already gone. He looked at Cassidy. She was 22 years old, and she was carrying her mother's life on her chapped hands, and she had driven onto Harlan Spur Road because the app told her to, and she had seen something through a gap in a door, and she had driven away, and she had ended up here in his corner booth, eating the plate that had sat cold and untouched for 6 years. He thought not this time. He said, "There is also something you should know about the delivery tonight. The helmet you wear for your night shifts. Does it have a camera?" She looked at him. Something shifted in her face. She said, "Yes. It runs from when I put it on. I never powered it down before I ran." Cole went very still. She said, "It was on when I pulled up to the building. It was on when I looked through the door." He said, "Where is the helmet now?" She said, "In my car, outside." He said, "Do not go get it yet. Do not go outside yet." She nodded. Patsy appeared from behind the counter and refilled both their coffee mugs without being asked, and went back without saying a word, which was the most useful thing anyone had done in the last 10 minutes. Cole picked up his coffee. He thought about what a helmet camera recording from inside the door of that building meant. He thought about what it meant that the recording existed on a device in an unlocked car in the parking lot of Doyle's on a rainy Friday night. He thought about the text message Vale had sent and about how much Vale knew and how quickly he had known it. He thought about Ray Coulter, a deputy's face recorded inside a building where a woman sat zip-tied to a chair. He said, "When Rita gets here, we secure that helmet first." Cassidy said, "Okay." He said, "Then you tell her everything you told me in the same order with the same precision." She said, "Okay." He said, "Then we figure out what Vale does next." She said, "What do you think he does next?" Cole set down his mug. He looked at the window. The rain against the glass had the settled quality of weather that intended to finish what it had started. He said men like Vale do not panic. They manage. He has already decided on the story. He is already thinking about which variables need to be controlled. You are a variable. She absorbed this without flinching, which told him again something he was noting. He said, "Tell me about Terrence Webb." She looked at him. The name landed unexpectedly, and it showed for a moment before she adjusted. She said he works in the business office at Vale Logistics. I have seen him twice at the restaurant when Marcus was meeting with people after hours. He always looked like he was somewhere he did not want to be. Cole said Rita mentioned his name to me 14 months ago. He is one of 3 people inside Vale's operation she believes keeps records she does not have access to. She thinks he has been looking for a reason to use them. Cassidy said, he always looked like that, like he had something he was deciding whether to put down. Cole said, tonight may be the night he decides. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the window in the dark lot beyond it, and the county road beyond that. She said, my phone has been in my pocket since I did not answer his call. He can see I have not moved. Cole said, he knows you are somewhere. He does not know where yet. As if in answer, his own phone buzzed. Bobby Fisk, his road captain. A man Cole had known for 19 years, whose judgment he trusted in the way you trust someone tested alongside you under conditions that tested everything. He answered. Bobby said, Cole, you need to hear this. One of our guys passing Doyle's on 11 about 40 minutes ago saw Vale's truck. Dark blue Ford. Parked on the county road about a quarter-mile north of your lot. Backed in behind the tree line. It was there when he passed and still there when he came back 20 minutes later. Cole said, is it still there? Bobby said, as of 10 minutes ago. Yes. It moved north on 11 after Cass left Harlan Spur, followed the most direct route here, and parked back from sight. They got here about 15 minutes after she did. Cole said, who else is with you? Bobby said Denny and Marsh. Marsh has his truck. Cole said park on the county road at the south end facing north. Let me know the moment that Ford moves. Bobby said, you gonna tell me what this is? Cole said, it is a long Friday night, and I will explain it properly when it is done. He put the phone down. He looked at Cassidy. He said Vale's truck is parked on the county road a quarter-mile north. Has been since shortly after you arrived here. She processed this without drama. She said he traced the delivery route from the restaurant dispatch records. He knew which driver was assigned to that address tonight. Cole said, yes. She said he knows it is me specifically, not just a driver. Cole said yes. She looked at the table, then back up. She said, what does that change? He said, it means he is not going to stop at a text message. They sat with that for a moment. The jukebox in the corner that had not been turned on all night. The rain. The neon, Cassidy said. He is not going to move on a diner on a county road with witnesses. Cole said, not tonight. But tonight is not the only night he has. She said, then we need to finish this tonight. He looked at her. She said it the way she said most things, without performance. A statement of what was true, followed by the implication of what it required. He said, yes, we do. Rita Walsh came through the door of Doyle's at 10:47. 38 years old, medium height. Brown hair, cut practically short, wearing jeans and a fleece jacket, and the expression of someone who had dressed in the dark and was already working the problem before she sat down. She carried nothing that looked official. She looked like a woman who had driven 40 minutes in the rain to meet someone and had spent every minute of the drive thinking. She saw Cole. She saw Cassidy. She came to the booth and sat beside Cole without introducing herself first, because introductions were a formality and this was not a formal situation. She looked at Cassidy and said, "I am Rita. Tell me about the second man, the one at the back of the room." Cassidy told her. The same order, the same precision. When she described the neck tattoo, the height, the build, Rita Walsh's expression did the thing Cole had heard on the phone and could now see directly. A contained reaction, the effort of keeping something from becoming visible before she decided what to do with it. Cassidy said, "Cole told me his name is Ray Coulter." Rita said, "Yes." Cassidy said, "Is that significant?" Rita said, "Ray Coulter's face inside that building is the first direct physical link between Marcus Vale's operation and active county law enforcement that I have been able to establish in 14 months of building this case. It is extremely significant." She said it without emphasis, and the lack of emphasis made the weight of it more evident rather than less. Cassidy said, "There is a helmet camera recording." Rita stopped. She looked at Cole. He looked back at her. Rita said, "Where?" Cassidy said, "In my car." "In the parking lot." Rita said, "Does it capture Coulter's face?" Cassidy said, "I looked through the door for approximately 4 seconds before I reversed. The helmet was on. The cam was running. The interior was fully lit. I could see him clearly from where I was." Rita said, "I need to get that helmet right now." Cole said, "I will go. Stay inside." He got up. He put on his jacket. He looked at Patsy, and Patsy looked back with the expression of a woman who had spent 60 years paying attention and did not need things explained that could be read. He went out into the rain. The parking lot held his motorcycle Cassidy Civic and 2 other vehicles. A pickup belonging to a man nursing pie at the counter, a sedan he did not recognize that had been there when he arrived. He looked at the sedan, Tennessee plates, a parking sticker on the windshield he could not read from where he stood. The windows were fogged from the inside, not from rain, from breath. Someone was sitting in it. Cole did not change his pace. He walked to Cassidy's Civic, retrieved the helmet from the back seat, and went back inside. He set the helmet on the table in front of Rita. She turned it over, found the side data port, and looked up. She said, "I have a cable in my car that will pull this. But before I touch anything, I want to establish chain of custody. If this footage is what it sounds like, I need it entered into evidence in a way that cannot be attacked in pretrial motions." Cole said, "How long does that take?" Rita said, "An hour, maybe less if the transfer is clean." She looked at Cassidy. She said, "I need to ask you something carefully. Is there anyone who knew you were running deliveries on Harlan Spur tonight? Anyone who could have sent you there deliberately?" Cassidy said, "The orders are assigned automatically by the app, proximity and availability. I was the closest driver to that address at that time." Rita said, "So this was not targeted? You were not sent there specifically?" Cassidy said, "I do not think so. I think I was simply the driver who was there." Rita nodded. She said, "That matters. Vale's response to you is reactive, not planned. He did not engineer your arrival. He is managing an unexpected variable. That changes his timeline." Cole said. "He still sent the message within 9 minutes of her leaving." Rita said, which means he had a camera on the exterior or someone watching the approach road. "He saw her arrive and leave and made the connection through the dispatch records. He knew within minutes that one of his own drivers had driven to that address. She said to Cassidy, "Does Vale know you well enough to identify you on exterior camera footage?" Cassidy said, "He hired me. I have worked for him for 8 months. Yes." Rita was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He knows it was you specifically." She said, "I need to know about anyone Vale might use as leverage. Anyone he would know you care about enough that it would change your choices." Cassidy said, "My mother. She is on a ventilator at Mercy West 3 nights a week. She cannot protect herself." Rita took out her personal phone and dialed a number. When it answered, she said, "This is Walsh. I need a welfare check on a patient at Mercy West Long-Term Care Unit. Name is Monroe. I need a staff member physically at that bedside within the next 15 minutes, and I need you to call me back when that is confirmed." She listened. She said, "Yes, it is that kind of night." She hung up. She looked at Cassidy. She said, "Someone I trust is making that call, not through Knox County." Cassidy said, "You already knew about my mother." Rita said, "I have been building a file on Marcus Vale for 14 months. Part of that file covers his employees. I cross-referenced your employment address. I was not surveilling you. I was mapping his network. You were part of it. I did not know what you knew or did not know." She said, "I also know something about a man named Terrence Webb." Cassidy looked up. Rita said, "He works in the business office at Vale Logistics. He contacted me 2 months ago through a public defender who passed along his name. He said he had records. Financial records, payment logs, names. He said he had been keeping them for 8 months and was trying to find someone he could trust with them. We have spoken 4 times. He has not yet given me anything formal. He is afraid." She said, "But if tonight moves the way I think it might move, Terrence Webb may find that he has run out of road to delay on." Cole looked at Cassidy. She was looking at the table with the focused expression of someone integrating a new piece into a picture that was becoming larger and more complicated than it had been 30 minutes ago. He said, "Rita, the sedan in the lot. Gray Tennessee plates. Someone is sitting in it." Rita did not look toward the window. She said, "My personal vehicle is a blue Subaru. That sedan is not mine." Cole said, "It was there when I arrived tonight." Rita said, "Vale's people found us faster than we expected." "Or Morrison's." She said, "Same thing at this point." She looked at Cassidy. She said, "In about 5 minutes, I am going to walk out to my car and get my cable. When I come back, we are going to pull this footage, and I am going to transmit it to a federal server outside Tennessee jurisdiction, specifically to an FBI contact in Nashville who has been waiting for something from me for 11 months. When that transmission completes, what is on this camera becomes part of a federal record. The physical device no longer matters." She paused. She said, "Between now and when that transmission completes, you are the person whose testimony connects the footage to the location and the time. You are the witness, and Vale needs to manage his witnesses." Cassidy said, "I understand." Rita stood up. She said, "Cole, watch the lot." She went out. The bell above the door made it sound. Cole looked at Cassidy. She was watching the window. The gray sedan visible through the fogged glass and the rain, a dark shape in the far corner. She said, "Is she going to be okay out there?" He said, "Rita Walsh has been working alone in hostile territory for over a year. She knows how to walk to her car." The door opened again. Rita came back in with a cable and her jacket wetter than it had been. She sat down. She said nothing about the lot. She connected the cable to the helmet cam port and to her laptop and opened it on the table between them. The transfer took 6 minutes. During those 6 minutes, nobody spoke. When it completed, Rita opened the file. She turned the laptop so Cole and Cassidy could both see. The footage was grainy in the way of inexpensive cameras in low light conditions, but clear enough. The dirt track, the approach, the barn, the door opening, the man in the canvas jacket. And then behind him, caught in the full wash of the fluorescent interior, for approximately 3 seconds, the second man turning toward the car. The neck tattoo was visible. The face was visible. Rita said, "That is Coulter." She said it quietly, the way people say things they have been working toward for a long time, when the thing finally arrives and turns out to be exactly what they believed it was. She said, "I am transmitting this now." She connected to a secure server and sent the file. The progress bar moved across the screen and completed. She typed a message to accompany the transmission and sent that too. She said, "It is in federal hands." She closed the laptop. She sat with her hands flat on the table. Then she said, "Now I need to tell you something that neither of you is going to want to hear." She looked at Cole. She said, "The protection around Vale goes further than Morrison and Coulter." Cole said, "How far?" Rita said, "There is a state senator. His name is David Harlan, 9 years in office. He's been connected to Vale's operation, not just financially, but operationally. He has used Vale's network for things that go significantly beyond money. I have been trying to establish this connection at the state level for 8 months. I have been stopped 3 times, files mislaid, a witness who recanted, and authorization delayed until it expired." She said, "What Cassidy found tonight, and what is now in federal hands, is the first piece of evidence that places Coulter directly inside the physical operation. That is a door. But opening it is going to alert everyone on the other side, including Harlan." Cole said, "How long before the federal office moves?" Rita said, "They need to corroborate. They need to build something airtight enough to touch a sitting state senator. That takes days, possibly longer." She said, "In the meantime, Vale knows he has a problem, and he knows the problem's name is Cassidy Monroe, and Vale will not wait." Cole's phone rang. Bobby Fisk. He answered. Bobby said the Ford moved about 6 minutes ago. Pulled out north on 11, turned east on Keener Road. A black Tahoe that had been parked on Keener pulled out too. They went east together. Cole said Keener Road runs east toward what? Bobby was quiet for a beat. Then he said, "Cole, Keener runs east toward Mercy West. 11 minutes from where they turned, Cole was already standing. He said, 'Bobby, go to Mercy West right now. Park at the main entrance. Do not go inside. Call me when you are there.' Bobby said. 'On my way.'" Cole ended the call and looked at Rita. He said, "2 of Vale's vehicles are moving on the hospital. 11 minutes out." Rita was already dialing. She got through and said, "I need that TBI unit at Mercy West moved up. Right now, I have 2 vehicles en route." She listened. Her expression was the expression of someone being told something technically true, but operationally useless. She said, "How long?" She put the phone down. She said, 45 minutes. They are deployed in a different county." The arithmetic was simple and bad. 11 minutes for Vale's vehicles to reach Mercy West. 45 minutes for protection to arrive. A woman on a ventilator on the 2nd floor who could not protect herself. Cole looked at Cassidy. She was already looking at him. She said, "How far is Mercy West?" He said, 14 minutes. She said, "Can you do it in 11?" He said, "Get in my truck." He looked at Patsy. He said, "Keys." Patsy reached under the counter and produced a set of keys on a plain ring without a word. She held them out. She said, "Blue F150 in the back lot. Full tank." She paused. "Bring it back without new dents." He said, "I will try." He looked at Rita. He said, "Stay here. Keep transmitting everything to Nashville. Do not open the door for anyone you have not personally verified." Rita said, "Cole, I should be the one going." He said, "You have everything we built tonight in your laptop and your phone and your head. If something happens to you, the case goes cold again. You stay here and you keep building." She looked at him for a moment. She said, "Do not become the aggressor. If this goes wrong legally, I need you to be the person who held the line." He said, "I understand." He went out the back with Cassidy behind him. The rain had eased to a drizzle. The sheets gone the county road, now visible through it. Patsy's blue F-150 sat in the back lot. He unlocked it. She was in the passenger seat before he had to say anything. He drove. The county roads between Doyle's and Mercy West were roads he knew the way. You know, roads you have driven for decades. Their curves and grades in the particular way they felt under tires in wet weather. He drove them at a speed that was honest about the urgency without being reckless about the conditions. Cassidy sat with her hands in her lap and her eyes on the road. She did not tell him to go faster. She did not tell him to slow down. For the first 7 minutes, she said nothing at all. Then she said, "Her name is Darlene, my mother." "I know you did not ask." Cole said, "Darlene, she said she named me after her grandmother, Cassidy Ann Monroe. Her grandmother was a Cassidy. She always said it was a strong name, a name for a woman who did not need anyone to tell her where to stand." She paused. She said she used to take me to the state fair every August. She saved for it starting in June. $2 bills in a jar on the kitchen counter. She said it did not count as saving if you could easily spend it on something else. $2 bills were hard to spend impulsively. Cole listened. He kept his eyes on the road and he listened. She said, "I do not know why I'm telling you this." He said, "Because she is a person and not just a situation." It matters to say that out loud sometimes. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You lost someone, someone specific, someone you still carry." He said, "Yes." She said, "The second plate." He said her name was Lena, my sister. She was 24 years old. She disappeared from Nashville 28 years ago. I never found out what happened to her. I spent years knowing the shape of what happened without being able to confirm the specifics. She said, "A network like Vale's." He said, "Something like it. Different operation, same geography. Same reach into the places that were supposed to be safe." She said, "I am sorry." He said, "I know." She said, "Is that why tonight? Is that why you did not just give me coffee and send me to wait for the police?" He drove for a moment in silence. He said, "When you walked into that diner tonight, I saw how you were carrying yourself. That specific way of being in a room, prepared for what might be coming. Not because you were afraid, because you had learned that being afraid without being prepared was worse." He said, "Lena carried herself like that. I saw it, and I did not understand what I was seeing until it was too late to do anything about it." He said, "Tonight, I understood what I was seeing." She looked at the side of his face. She did not say anything. She turned back to the road. Mercy West came into view, its lit complex visible through the drizzle, the parking structure and main entrance bright with the institutional lighting of a place that never fully sleeps. Bobby's truck was at the main entrance hazards on. Cole pulled in. He called Bobby. Bobby answered immediately. He said, "I am at the front doors. Ford and Tahoe are in the east lot." Two men went in through the emergency entrance on the east side about 2 minutes ago. I did not follow. Cole said, "Good. Stay at the front. Do not let anyone leave through the front who matches what I am about to describe." He described the two men. Bobby said, "Understood." Cole parked. He looked at Cassidy. He said, "Stay close. If I say stop, you stop. If I say go, you go, without waiting to see why." She said, "I understand." They went through the main entrance. The lobby was a hospital lobby at 11:30 at night, quieter than daytime, but not empty. A woman at the information desk, a man in a waiting area with his head in his hands, a security guard who looked up and looked back down. Cole went to the information desk. He said it was a family emergency. He said it in the tone of a man who has calibrated a specific tone to communicate that the conversation about visiting hours is already concluded. She gave him the floor, second floor, long-term care unit, the nursing station at its center hallways extending in both directions. Sandra Pruitt was at the station. Cassidy recognized her, and Sandra recognized Cassidy, and the speed of Sandra's expression said the situation on this floor had already developed in the time between Rita's call and their arrival. Sandra said, "Two men were here 7 minutes ago. They said they were from the county health department with paperwork for a patient transfer. I told them the transfer had been flagged under investigation and gave them the authorization number Rita Walsh provided. They left the unit. The guard at the east stairwell said they went down, but did not exit the building." Cole said, "Which room?" Sandra said 214. Left hall. Cole said to Cassidy, "Go with Sandra. Stay at the nursing station. Do not go to the room yet." Cassidy said, "That is my mother's room." Cole said, "I know. Give me 2 minutes." She looked at him with those green-gray eyes, and he could see the cost of what he was asking. The cost of being told to wait when the thing you are waiting near is the person you have been working 3 jobs to keep alive. She nodded anyway, which was the kind of thing that does not have a name, but which Cole had been noticing all night. He went down the left hall. Room 214 had its door closed. The light beneath it was the dim overnight light of a patient room. Cole stopped outside and listened. He heard the ventilator cycling the slow patient rhythm of it, the most ordinary and extraordinary sound in the world, depending on what it meant to you. He opened the door. The room was as it should have been, a woman in the bed, thin with long illness connected to the machines, doing for her what her body could no longer do. Her face in the dim light carried the structure of Cassidy's face in it. The line of the jaw, the way the eyes sat. Darlene Monroe, who had saved in $2 bills for the state fair. The room appeared to hold only her. Cole stood in the doorway and listened to the building around him. Then he heard something from inside the room, from the small private bathroom at the far left. A sound of movement. He stepped back from the doorway and to the right, putting the wall behind him. The bathroom door opened. The man in the canvas jacket came out. The first man from the building on Harlan Spur. The one who had looked at Cassidy's car with the expression of a man making a calculation. He saw Cole and stopped. They looked at each other in the dim light of room 214, with the ventilator cycling its rhythm between them. Cole said, "You need to leave this room." The man said nothing. He was running his calculation again. Cole could see it, the size of the man in front of him, the distance to the door, the distance to the bed, what each option cost. Cole said, "There is a TBI agent in this building. A federal witness protection authorization is in place for the patient in this room. Anyone in this room without that authorization is committing a federal offense right now while we are having this conversation." He said, "Walk out of this room and out of this hospital, and you are a man who is in the wrong place. Stay in this room, and you are a man who chose to make it worse." The man in the canvas jacket stood very still for 3 seconds. Then he walked to the door. He went past Cole, close enough that Cole could smell rain on his jacket. He went into the hall, and Cole watched him move to the elevator and heard the elevator open and close. He called Bobby. He said, "One of them is coming out through the main lobby in about 30 seconds. Track where he goes. Do not stop him. Just watch." Bobby said, "On it." Cole stood in the hallway outside 214 and called Rita. He told her what had happened. She said she had been on the phone with her FBI contact for the last 12 minutes. The footage had been reviewed and verified by 2 independent agents who recognized Coulter from prior federal contact in an unrelated matter. The federal warrant process was moving faster than projected. She said, "They want Vale tonight. They do not want him running." Cole said, "He is in the east lot." Rita said, "I need Vale in that lot for 20 more minutes. I have 2 FBI agents driving from Nashville. They have been moving since I made my first call tonight." Cole said, "I will see what I can do." He went back to the nursing station. Cassidy was at the counter watching the hall when he came down it. He could see her reading him from 30 feet, reading the quality of his walk, the set of his face. He said, "Your mother is okay. The room is clear." She closed her eyes for 1 second. Just one. Then opened them. He said, "Vale is still in the east lot. FBI is 20 minutes out. I need to keep him there." Sandra said, "Vale. Marcus Vale. He donated equipment to this hospital 2 years ago. There's a plaque in the east wing." She paused. "I always thought it was strange. A logistics company donating medical equipment." She said it with the particular tone of a woman who had stored an unresolved question for 2 years and was now watching it resolve in a direction she had suspected. Cole said to Sandra, "If anyone comes to this unit asking about Cassidy Monroe or about the patient in 214, between now and morning, you call this number and you tell them nothing." He gave her Rita's number. Sandra said, "I have been a nurse for 23 years, and I have been waiting for a reason to stop being polite to people who make me uncomfortable." She put the number in her phone. She said, "Go do what you need to do." Cole looked at Cassidy. He said, "You stay up here with Sandra." She said, "Cole?" He looked at her. She said, "He is not going to sit in that lot and wait. You know that." Cole said, "Yes." She said, "He will come himself. That is what men like him do when they feel the structure collapsing. They go to the thing they think belongs to them." Cole said, "I know." She said, "Be careful." He said, "That is the second time tonight someone has told me that." She said, "Did you listen the first time?" He almost smiled, the briefest shift at the corner of his mouth. He said, "Stay here." He went to the east lot. The rain had stopped. Not tapered. Stopped completely the way Tennessee rain sometimes stops, as if a decision has been made. The east lot was fluorescent lit and quiet, the hospital's delivery area and staff parking on this side. The dark blue Ford was there. The black Tahoe was there. A silver SUV parked between them that Bobby had not mentioned. Marcus Vale was standing beside the Ford. He was not what Cole had constructed from the evidence of his operation. Cole had built a picture from the size of what Vale had assembled and the reach of his protection and the speed of his response tonight. He had expected someone who matched the operation, someone whose exterior announced what he was. Vale was 50 medium height, with the build of a younger life of physical work that had softened without disappearing. He wore a dark coat and no hat in the post-rain air, and his face was the face of a man who had learned that forgettable was an asset and had cultivated it for decades. He looked like a man who managed things, which was exactly what he was. He watched Cole cross the lot toward him and did not move. The quality of his stillness was the stillness of someone who had been anticipating this specific moment since approximately 10:15, when a delivery driver backed out of a dirt track on Harlan Spur Road. Cole stopped at 12 feet. He put his hands in his jacket pockets. He looked at Vale. Vale said, "I was going to leave an hour ago." Then I thought no. Cole Hargrove is a man who thinks through his next move. I would like to be there when he makes it. His voice was measured without hostility. The voice of a man treating every conversation, including terrible ones, as something transactional and manageable. This was the thing about men like Vale that was worse than if they were simply violent. They had learned to conduct even the worst conversations in the tone of something that could still be resolved with the right arrangement, Cole said. The footage from the building on Harlan Spur is in federal hands. The TBI agent who transmitted it made 3 calls tonight, and one of them was to the FBI field office in Nashville. They have been building toward your operation for 11 months. What she sent them tonight opened the federal warrant process. Coulter's face is identified by 2 agents who know him independently. He said it without preamble, because preamble was not the language this conversation required. Vale absorbed this, a small tightening around the eyes, the calculation accelerating. He said Ray Coulter is a county deputy. His presence at a private property on a Friday night is not evidence that a competent attorney cannot handle in a pretrial motion. Cole said Rita Walsh has 14 months of case construction built toward exactly that argument. The footage is not the whole case. It is the piece that opens federal jurisdiction. The rest was already built. Vale looked at him. He said, "You did all of this for a delivery driver who took a wrong turn." Cole said, "I did all of this because a young woman drove onto your property and saw something and deserved to live a life that was not damaged because of it." Vale said, "She has worked for me for 8 months. I know her circumstances. I have been more than fair as an employer." Cole said, "That is an interesting way to describe what you tried to do to her mother's ventilator tonight." Something shifted in Vale's expression. Not guilt, not shame. The pragmatic acknowledgement of a man recategorizing a tactic that had been identified. He said, "Whatever you think you have built tonight, David Harlan has survived 4 federal inquiries in 9 years." Cole said Harlan's chief of staff placed a call to the FBI Nashville field office 40 minutes ago. Vale's face stilled. Vale's, Cole said. When someone at that level calls the FBI before the FBI calls him, he is not managing your protection. He is managing his own distance from you. He is deciding how much of the structure he can put between himself and what is coming. And the answer he arrived at tonight is all of it. He said, "You built something that took years and careful work and people who believed they were covered. Some of those people are deciding right now whether to be first in line or last." He said Terrence Webb. The smooth surface cracked, not dramatically. a fracture small and specific. The name landed the way the name of a man you trusted and should not have lands when you hear it in the wrong context. Something raw came through the crack, something that had nothing managed about it. Cole said, he has been keeping records for 8 months. 2 sets, one for evidence and one for insurance, in case the first one was buried. He gave both to Rita Walsh tonight, along with a statement. He said he was tired of being afraid. Vale stood very still. Cole said, I am going to tell you what I told you inside that building tonight through the man I sent out of your way. You can stand in this lot and watch what comes next arrive, or you can spend the time between now and when it arrives making choices about how you want this to go. Those are the options. Vale looked at him. His jaw worked. The calculation was still running, but it was running in a different register. Now, not the arithmetic of management and exposure, but the arithmetic of a man who has understood that the structure he built has a load-bearing failure and is not recoverable. He said, you have no idea what this cost you. Cole said, I know exactly what it cost. He said, I decided a long time ago that some costs were worth paying. I just took a while to start paying them. Headlights swept the east lot entrance. 2 dark sedans, federal plates moving with the unhurried authority of vehicles that belong to people who do not need to hurry because their authority precedes them. They parked at the lot entrance. 4 men got out wearing jackets with identification visible. They moved toward Cole and Vale with the professional calm of people executing a process that had been authorized and documented before they arrived. The lead agent said Marcus David Vale. He said it the way the formal use of a full name in a parking lot at midnight carries the weight of everything that follows. He said he had a federal warrant. He said the words that begin the process that ends in the way such processes end. Vale looked at Cole as the agent spoke. Not at the agents. At Cole. The expression of a man whose story about how things work has reached the chapter where it stops being accurate. He said to Cole quietly, not for the agents, but for Cole alone, I want you to know that I never lose. Cole looked at him. He said, that is what you believe. He said, but tonight you lost to a delivery driver who took a wrong turn and a man who has been eating dinner alone for 6 years and was ready for exactly this. Vale was placed in the back of the first sedan. Ray Coulter, located by the second team in the hospital stairwell, was placed in the second. Both vehicles left the east lot at the pace of a process continuing. Cole stood in the empty lot. The post-rain air was cold and clean in the way East Tennessee air is clean after a hard rain, washed and direct. He breathed it in. He looked at the lot where the 2 sedans had been. He looked at the hospital entrance. He called Rita. She answered. He told her it was done. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said both of them. He said both of them. Another silence. Then she said, Cole. He said, I know. She said, thank you. He said, call me when the warrants are fully processed. He went back inside. He took the elevator to the second floor and walked down the left hall to the nursing station. Cassidy was not at the counter. Sandra pointed toward the room 214. She said she went in about 10 minutes ago. She said she needed to see her mother. Cole walked to 214. The door was open. He stopped in the doorway. Cassidy was sitting in the chair beside the bed. Her mother's hand was in both of hers. The ventilator cycled its slow rhythm. The overnight light was dim and warm, and the room was quiet enough that Cole could hear Cassidy breathing. The careful, measured breathing of a person who is holding herself together and almost succeeding. She was talking, quietly. not a conversation. The way you say things that have been waiting to be said to the person they were meant for, even when you are not certain they can fully hear you. Cole could not make out the words. He did not try. He stood in the doorway and he stayed. He stood there for a long time in the doorway of room 214 while the ventilator breathed its patient rhythm and the night outside the hospital window began its slow turn toward morning. When Cassidy came out, she had been crying in the composed way of someone who gave themselves no permission, and the evidence of it was only in the redness at the corners of her eyes and the particular steadiness that comes after. The steadiness that follows when the thing you were bracing for did not happen after all. She looked at Cole. She said, "Is it done?" He said Vale and Coulter are in federal custody. Rita is processing everything with Nashville. By morning, there will be a TBI agent outside your mother's room and a federal protective status on file covering both of you. She said Harlan. He said his chief of staff called the FBI before we even got to the hospital. When someone at that level runs before he is asked to run, he has already made his decision about how much of the structure he is willing to sacrifice. The federal case will take time to build against him formally. But the protection he provided Vale is gone as of tonight. And without that protection, the parts of this that remain are manageable. She said in the woman in the building on Harlan Spur. The woman in the chair. He said Rita has the location documented and the federal warrant covers the property. When they move on the evidence, they will find whatever there is to find. That process started tonight. She said, "Is that enough?" He said, "It is the most that tonight can do. Tomorrow does different work." She looked at him for a long moment. She said, "You could have given me coffee and told me to call the police and gone back to your meal. No one would have blamed you." He said, "Yes." She said, "Why didn't you?" He had answered this in pieces throughout the night. To Rita, to himself, in the truck, in the parking lot facing Vale. Each answer in the language of that moment, which were different languages for the same thing. He said, because 28 years ago, someone should have stayed, and they did not. And I have been the person who did not stay for so long that I had forgotten there was another version of the choice. He said, "Tonight I remembered." She held his gaze and did not say she was sorry about Lena. She held the unsaid thing in the space between them with the particular generosity of a person who understands that some acknowledgments are larger as silence than they would be as words. She said, "I'm going to stay here tonight with her." He said, "Good." She said, "You should sleep." He almost said he was fine, stopped. He said, "I will sleep when Patsy's truck is back in her lot." She almost smiled. The edge of it the same, almost, that had appeared twice before tonight and transformed her face briefly into something lighter than everything she was carrying. She said, "Tell Patsy the coffee was good." He said, "She knows." He drove Patsy's truck back to Doyle's on County Road 11. The county road was empty at this hour, the rain entirely gone, the sky beginning the pre-dawn gray that comes before color returns to the world. He drove at the pace of a man who has been moving fast all night and is allowing himself for the first time to move at the pace of someone who is not pursuing or being pursued. Patsy was still there, behind the counter with a mug of coffee and the crossword, her pen scratching quietly across the paper. She looked up when he came in through the back. She said nothing. She put a mug of coffee in front of him and went back to her crossword. He sat down on the stool nearest the corner booth. He looked at the booth. The table had been cleared, both plates removed sometime during the night the surface clean and empty. He looked at both sides of it, the side he had always occupied and the side that had held the absence for 6 years. Both sides empty now. Both sides just a table. He sat there for a while. He drank his coffee. He thought about Lena. He thought about what she had been at 24 and what she might have been at 52, what the decades of a life she had not gotten to live might have produced if the geography had been different and the protection had arrived before she needed it instead of after. He thought about the particular weight of not knowing, the weight of a loss without a final fact, only the shape of one. He thought about Cassidy Monroe, sitting beside her mother's bed, holding her mother's hand in room 214. He thought about the state fair and $2 bills saved in a jar. He thought about the second plate, what it had been for 6 years and what it had been tonight. He thought that they were not different things, that they were the same refusal expressed twice. The refusal to let someone become invisible, the refusal to let a person be gone without leaving a place at the table. He thought maybe that was what the 6 years had been building toward. Not the grief, not the penance, the practice. The practice of keeping a place, so that when the night came that required it, he would know how. His phone buzzed on the counter. A text. He looked at it, from Cassidy. Short, no punctuation, the kind of message that gets sent fast before the sender can reconsider. It said, "Next time you're in Knoxville, maybe we could get coffee." Cole looked at the message for a moment. He looked at the empty corner booth. He thought about what Lena would have said about a 22-year-old woman with chapped hands and a torn sleeve and a scar above her eyebrow who had walked onto Harlan Spur Road by mistake and walked out the other side of the longest night of her life still standing. He thought she would have liked her. He thought yes, she would have. He typed back, "I know a place on 11 that makes good pie." Patsy looked up from her crossword. She read his expression the way she read everything, without asking and without needing to be told. She smiled small and private and looked back down at her crossword. Cole put his phone in his pocket. He looked at the window. The sky outside was doing what skies do when the dark is finished, with them finding the first pale edge of light along the eastern ridge, slow and indifferent and faithful, doing the thing it had been doing over this particular ridge of East Tennessee for longer than anyone sitting in a diner on County Road 11 could meaningfully imagine. He finished his coffee. He sat in the diner at Doyle's on County Road 11, and he breathed the air of a morning that had been earned the only way mornings like it ever are, by staying in the dark long enough to see what it contained, and choosing when the choice was there to stay anyway. Somewhere across the city, a woman on the second floor of Mercy West breathed with the help of a machine that no one was going to touch. Her daughter sat beside her and watched the same sunrise through the window and held her hand and did not let go. And at the counter of a diner with a red neon open sign that had been burning since before either of them was born, a man who had been eating dinner alone for 6 years sat with an empty coffee mug and understood for the first time in a long time that the practice of keeping a place for someone had never really been about the past. It had been about being ready for the night when it would matter again. He had stayed this time. That did not give back what was lost. Nothing gave that back. But it was what the Fridays had been for. Not the grief and not the penance and not the ritual of a ghost who deserved better than to be reduced to a cold plate on a corner table every week until he died. It was for this. For being the kind of man who knew how to stay when staying was the hardest and the only right thing. He had been a slow learner. but he had gotten there.